First of all, Sanjeev, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Mike, for having me. It's I think something I'm grateful for you to have to take this message out to the people. I think it's time to wake up.
You've taken this radical step in resigning. What prompted you to go public in the way that you did? Because it wasn't behind the scenes; it was really out in front, wasn't it?
Absolutely, I came out, in the front foot and fighting because I had already formed a very dim view of the government's approach to this pandemic over the past 6 months, right from the day one, to be precise. I had been communicating to my seniors within the government, that the data are very clear. They're telling us it's distributed in a particular way, the age-based distribution of risk, the comorbidities, so on. And what we saw at the end of the day, I think I was reading somewhere that less than 2% of the people who died in Victoria or in Australia, I think it was, have been less than the age of 60. So when you can see such a sharp demarcation of the data in terms of the risk distribution, it is the most basic common sense to really, really, really protect the elderly. And I think that was the message I passed out to my seniors in writing, and I've got records of that. I think it's the 20th or 25th of February, as soon as the studies came out from China on this information, I was told within the government that this is a matter for the DHHS, which is the health department. Now, in a normal course of events, I would expect that the Department of Treasury and Finance, we are not just paid there to sit and listen to what departments do or tell us. We're paid significant money by the government to advise on the comprehensive nature of the policy implications of a particular proposal. So if somebody comes to me and says that I'm going to shut down all the roads because, hey guys, that's going to shut down stop all the fatalities, road fatalities, you can bet that I'm going to start, asking a lot of questions about the total impacts. Now, this was pretty similar in that sense. A lockdown of the entire society was pretty much similar to shutting down all the roads. In fact, people basically didn't get out of the roads as well. And so road fatalities did come down, by the way, as well. But the point is that there are significant implications of such policies. And so there is a cost benefit test. I understand that they hired some, maybe consultants or whatever from the Melbourne Uni or whatever, and they were doing this modeling, epidemiological modeling. And I can only say that never in my life have I seen any policy based purely on models. Policy making involves the analysis of all. The model is an input to the complete picture. The model is not telling us how many people are going to die of suicides, how many people are going to not, get themselves tested for cancer, and so on. So the entire picture has to be coughed up by those people who are proposing a particular policy, in this case, a line department like DHHS. But I suspect because of the emergency situation that was declared, maybe some senior people in DTF thought it's not our business anymore. And that is a fatal mistake, and I'm going to write a lot about that in the future. I'm writing a longish article questioning the way our public service has performed in this particular case, more like a group think and agreeing to whatever a particular department has proposed, rather than putting out the entire picture. And in this case, as I've argued in the Fin Review article, it was even more necessary because in a crisis situation, there's not much time to consult. So you should actually put out all your draft papers and draft thinking publicly so that anybody who knows anything about this issue, and there could be people whom you don't know, but they actually are quite competent, and they will tell you where you're wrong. But we never did that. We were operating like a star chamber, a kind of hidden place where all the data was hidden and nobody could figure out what's going on. But we saw the decisions being taken, and the decisions started with picking up the most heavy-handed approach, and went on to the more and more heavy-handed approaches like the curfews and so on. Now, in each of these cases, as I've argued elsewhere, the fundamental rule of regulation making, and I was in the regulatory policy area in the department, we insist on applying on the government undertaking the least intrusive, the least burdensome, risk-based approach that will just assist the community to fix the problem without intervening unnecessarily. Now, the light-handed approach is basically. So what we saw here was the complete reversal or the abandonment of the good policy-making processes that do exist in the government's own guidance on how policy is made. I suspect that is due to the fact that this was the emergencies. But to cut this whole story short, by the time I had started writing these articles, I was putting out my views publicly, And then they started a bit of excessive stuff, like wearing masks in the open air, and I questioned the evidence, and I started getting critical of the chief health officer. I started getting critical of the Victoria Police once they started beating up people, girls being choked for not wearing a mask in the open air, where they're not transmitting anything to anybody. I began to see that this was deteriorating rapidly, and I started my tone maybe got a bit rough. And I was, suffering serious angst at the whole situation, that I came all the way to Australia. I advocate this as a great country with all the best policies in the world and the best policy frameworks. And here we are at a point where we're beating up our little girls, our little women. We're actually stealing. The police go and take out their mobile phone. Another one was the shocking one was the police boot on somebody's head. Look, I got really angry, and then might have said a couple of rough words. And the department senior officials and the head of the people and culture, they convened a meeting with me on the 9th of September and said, they didn't identify any particular post, but they said, hey, you should go and review and remove all the direct and indirect criticism of the government. Now, the direct criticism was probably almost insignificant, but the indirect could be thousands. I'm criticizing the lockdown policy for 6 months. I've got all the research behind me to say this is unscientific. This is not going to kill the virus. This doesn't solve the problem. You need to flatten the curve in a sensible manner, which you're not doing, because ICUs in Victoria are completely empty. And we have not really dealt with the situation as we would do in any other case. What we've done is we've been having a unilateral focus on one item, which is the coronavirus. So at that point, I decided within minutes of that meeting, when my bosses said, hey, you need to do this, social media cleanup, I decided I got to go and raise the alarm publicly, because I'm already raising it publicly in a bit of a softer way. Now I'll do it in a really, really hard way. I'll bring it right up to Dan's doorstep, which is what I've done. I brought it at his doorstep. I'm challenging Dan Andrews, no longer a public servant of his, a full-fledged citizen of this country, and I'm a citizen of Australia for 15 years. I'm a full-fledged citizen exercising my rights to demand the knowledge and the information on the basis of which this government is making its decisions.
Tell me this. Yeah. Is this, out of the three, is this more of a health issue, of an incompetency issue, or just gross stupidity, or is it a grab for power issue?
Look, these are the kind of speculations. I really can't say what's going on in the government's mind. All I can say is that maybe there's groupthink going on, I love my people in Victoria. I always have said the Victorian Treasury was Australia's best treasury. No, nobody can compare, including yours from Queensland. I'm sorry to say, we've had competition there, and I think we compete with the New South Wales Treasury and the Canberra, and I have very strong reasons to believe we are the best. Now, with such a high quality of talent sitting inside the department, for us to get this kind of a policy environment in Victoria, where people like me who are very happy working here have to actually quit and then protest, I think it reflects something wrong within the public service more than anything else. I'm not sure who's grabbing power, but all I can say is the public servants, senior public servants, are not advising the government sensibly.
Do you think the recent polls, which basically show Dan sitting in the mid to high 60s for handling the crisis so well, which he's not, and it's very obvious if you go outside of Victoria or outside of Australia. Do you think, though, the media and social media has played a great impact on swaying the population's view of this mass hysteria?
I think the media is probably partly to blame. I think the major issue here is that like I was reading in the UK, what they did was the SAGE, SAGE is kind of the shorthand for one of the advisory groups there. They actually decided to deliberately and consciously scare the people. That was a conscious decision taken by the government, and by the way, Australia probably did similar things, and I think the reports will come out one day. We should get the Royal Commission on this. And the question then is, if the government, because I do know for sure, and I don't watch TV, but I've been told by people, including my wife, and including people who have reported to me on Twitter, etc., that hey, the people have been badly scared by the advertisements that are going out on these mediums. So it's not just the media as such. It's basically the government pouring in taxpayers' money to scare the people. All right. Now the net result, based on certain polls that I've read about, not necessarily in Australia, but in many other countries, particularly Europe and America, is that the average per punter there thinks that 100 times more, actually more than 100 times more people have died from this virus than the actual numbers. So they're estimating around 7 to 8%. The common man thinks that 7 to 8% of the population has died. All right. Now, how did the population get so scared? This is, I call the great hysteria. Never before in human history was any scare as big as this. But it's actually funded by the taxpayer. The taxpayers' dollars have been used, is what I'm arguing, to actually funnel and create the scare. And of course you can scare people who are not like me. I'm writing 17 articles. I'm reading non-stop books and journal articles on biology because I've got a science background. Okay, very strong science background. So I'm reading all that stuff and I'm reporting, but I don't expect the common man to have the time for that, right? So they're just looking at the ads and they're saying, oh my God, this is so scary. And who's paying for the ads? Well, they are themselves paying for the ads. So now who's going to break that thing, the gridlock? That is the media. Now the media, there are a few people, I think Adam Creighton and many others, Chris Kenny and a few others, Janet Albrechtsen, I would say, Sky News, many people there. There have been a number of people in the media who have been questioning this thing. There have been people like Gigi Foster and other economists raising matters in Australia. But I think at the overall, I suspect here's the problem. The caliber, just the intellectual caliber required to actually ask questions is just too high. And I think journalism does not hire that kind of caliber, okay? That kind of caliber is generally found in business or is found in the public sector. Now, the media, when it starts hiring leftovers, basically, of the intellectual field, these guys have no capacity to ask the question, to even do a simple calculation like the one I showed you. Hey, how many people would have died today if it was Spanish flu? 210 million. I have actually not seen that. I wrote to the Australian as a comment. They actually had published a chart saying 50 million died. They put a little diagram and they put a little box. They put a little image of a virus and they sized the different pandemics and they showed it as 50 million. Well, the other, and the Asian flu or whatever, with the numbers that were there at that time. But sorry, you got to scale up to today, please. For God's sake, do not mislead everybody by putting 50 million where at the time when the world population is 1.8 billion, today is 7.5 billion. Please scale up, for God's sake. You don't have that basic ability. The Australian does not have the journalists who can calculate basic things. So when you're looking at the quality of journalism being so pathetic, then you look at the questions these guys ask their ministers. I think that, when we talk of the 8R or whatever scores, journalism requires some of the smartest people in the world. Actually, for a society to survive, we need very, very smart judges. So the lawyers must be the very, very topmost in the society, because that sets up the framework for everything. I mean, if our lawyers and judges are poor quality, we're sunk as a society. It doesn't matter whatever else happens. Then you want very high quality economists, and then you want very, very high quality journalists. Now, these people will actually look at the broader picture and keep the society on control. But journalism, I think, has failed because they just don't have the caliber. So I'm sorry about that, journalists. Most of you just don't understand basic arithmetic. But the problem here is you paid this very competent public sector. I mean, these public servants, I'm just one example. Like there are 100 plus economists in the Treasury, altogether 800 people, 800 of us, 800, including people, with finance and super backgrounds, okay? Extraordinary people, each of them an extraordinarily brilliant person in his own right, or his or her own right. And what are these people doing? What did they do to advise the government? I don't expect the minister to have the caliber of what the public servant is. The public servants are paid very well, and they're given a permanent job. They sort of, a quiet job. They can just do the analysis and advise. Okay, that's a simple job. Just do it. And so I don't blame that much the ministers. I don't blame that much the journalists. I actually blame the public service, which has been paid by the taxpayer billions of dollars in tax salaries to advise the government in the best possible manner. And I was proud to be part of this government, which actually was doing its job very well.
Sanjeev, you're very passionate, but what about support? Private support from many officials. Has there been much, and is there widespread unease in the bureaucracy about how these policies and decision making are being handled by the Andrews government?
Very good point, Mike. And here is the problem we faced with the working from home environment. So we were I've been working from home from end of February, and most others in the department from mid-March, and we've not met each other. What happens in an organization like us, a collegiate organization. Okay, we would be best represented as a little college, a college of economists. We're basically talking to each other, bumping into each other, chatting around, and talking to the bosses. Everybody equal. You can be a fresh economist, you can be the senior most person. They're all equal, chit chatting all the time. Okay, so that completely collapsed in the work from home situation. So then what happened is we managed, there was a group of people, and I won't name, cannot name, and will never name. But there's a small group of people we were interacting, okay, and that was expressing significant concern, and the concerns were getting more and more raised and escalated. And I think one or two even said, "Oh my God, I've got to leave this." Leave Melbourne. This is getting crazy. As soon as it's open, I've got to get out of this place because they'll get a job anywhere else in the world. Economists who are working in the Treasury are competent enough to get a job anywhere in the world. That's the kind of level, right? So they can just escape and get out, and I think many will, but they should not. I've been asking them, please hang on, hold on. We will sort it out. Let's see. This is not the end of the world. We will get Victoria back on track. And for that, what we need is the good people to not leave us, okay? So that's the first thing. We don't want a good economist to leave and the good people to leave, but we do want the government to start thinking again. And I think the concern that people have, I can't generalize, which is very significant and widespread, but I would imagine that anybody who's committed to good policy, and there are all of us who are committed to good policy, would have deep down very, very severe concerns about the way this has been done.
If somebody wants to add to the cause, how do they contact you?
I'm available freely on the internet. My email, sabhlok@gmail.com. It's available widely. My Twitter. I've got a pretty large public profile for the last 15 years. Okay, so I'm available to anybody. Yeah.